Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Oluwagbemiga and I'm a front-end web developer, and this is GENIX-JS. On my YouTube channel, I'll be teaching you everything you need to know to get started with front-end web development. And in today's video, we'll be learning the very basics of HTML and how to write HTML code to develop websites. So here is our course outline for today. We'll be looking at what HTML is, how HTML works, the basic tags and elements in HTML, how the tags come together to form a basic web page, and we're going to be building our very own web page as a bonus for this video. Let's get started. What is HTML? Firstly, you need to know that the full meaning of HTML is hypertext markup language. HTML is the language of the web, yes? It is a markup language that is used to structure documents with different file formats such as music, video, pictures, graphics on the web in the form of web pages. Basically, HTML is the language that structures the web using different file formats such as videos, audios, pictures, graphics on the browser through websites. And we know a website is a combination of different web pages. And these web pages consist of content that are in these different file formats that are rendered by HTML, such as the file formats we see here. Okay, so now we need to understand why we need to learn HTML. HTML is the most foundational language you can learn as a programmer. Every single software programmer or developer knows HTML. And again, as a front-end web developer, you need to learn HTML because this is what you will use to develop each and every web page in your career. So yeah, it says for every web developer and programmer, HTML is a must-have skill to be possessed by them. Why? Because it is essential for everything we do on the web. It is essential for everything we do on the web. How does HTML work? HTML runs on the browser. Why? Because it is the browser language. It is the language that structures the web by rendering different file formats, as we said earlier. HTML uses its elements and tags to display information of different formats on the browser through web pages. So now that we understand how HTML works, what HTML is, why we need to learn HTML, let's now understand the different tags and elements which are building blocks of every HTML code that is being rendered on the browser through web pages. Firstly, what are tags? Tags are building blocks of every HTML element. What are HTML elements? HTML elements are in three categories. We have the opening tag, we have the content, and we have the closing tag. Well, HTML elements can be grouped into two as well. We have opening and closing tags, and we have self-closing tags. Essentially, we can say HTML elements are building blocks that perform specific function, but either have content or attributes in them. Example of HTML elements that have content in them: we have the h1 tag, the h2 tag, because they have an opening tag, the content in them, and then they have the closing tag. Example of elements that don't have closing tags but attributes: we have the image tag, which has the src attribute. So to understand this in deeper context, let's dive into our code editor where we'll be writing some HTML code. So first thing I'm going to do for us to start coding is to run my command prompt, and to do this I'm going to click on Windows and R, the Windows key and the letter R. So you can see that this dialog opened up by me running that command or that shortcut. So here I already have CMD by default because I use command prompt a lot. It's very advisable as a programmer that you understand the basic command line, and you know how to interact with it. So I'll be dropping a link in the description below to of the most popular command lines that you can use to speed up your process as a web developer or a software programmer. So I'm going to be typing command prompt. Okay, so I typed in command prompt, that's CMD, and it opened up this for me. So yeah, I've put it on full screen so we can see it clearer. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm currently in my HP PC because that's the user, which is me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the directory to the location I want to create my document folder. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directory, which is cd, and then to desktop. It doesn't matter, it can be in small letter as well. So yeah, I'm inside my desktop already. So now the next thing I'm going to do is, since we're going to create a new folder, we don't have any existing HTML folder or project. So to create that, I'm going to type mkdir, which stands for make directory. So that's mkdir, and then the name of the folder you want to create in desktop. So I'm going to do new HTML project or new HTML file. Okay, let's use new HTML folder. Okay, now we might not see that it has created, but we can change our directory to that particular folder by typing cd and the name of this. So I'm just gonna type it down now, new HTML folder. Okay, now guys, so we are currently inside our HTML folder, and since we are using Visual Studio Code, as I said earlier, there's a shortcut on the command prompt that enables us to open Visual Studio Code in our project without us having to, click on start and then type VS Code. But you can do that if you want to. So I'm going to use the two methods, the command line method and the traditional method. So the first method I'm going to be using, I'm just going to minimize command line command prompt. So the first method I'm going to be using is the traditional method, that is to open VS Code the normal way. To create our folder and to launch VS Code using the traditional method, I'm going to click on start, which I've already done, and then I'm going to type VS Code. In case you don't have VS Code downloaded on your system, I'll put the link in the description below so you can download VS Code and get started with your development process. I've done here, then I'm going to click on new window, and then that should open up now. Okay, guys, so VS Code has opened up, and I'm going to maximize it here. Yes, so here is VS Code. You can customize it in any way you want. You can change the theme by coming to settings, but that doesn't really matter in this video since we're looking at HTML basics. Okay, so now you can see these three options here. If you come to this start, you can see these three options here. You see new file, open folder, but we don't have any new project. So what are we going to do? We're going to open our folder since we already created a folder using command prompt. So we're going to click on open folder, and then navigate to desktop since that was where we created our folder. We'll navigate to desktop. Now the name of our folder was new HTML folder. So here it is here, new HTML folder. You can name yours anyone, pending it's your choice basically, since this is you learning. So click on select folder and it should open up the folder for us. Yeah, there's also another way to open HTML folder. Well, I don't have my desktop, I don't have any desktop icon. So basically what you can do is you can open VS Code. I just snip my screen to the right. That's Windows and arrow keys to do that. Snip my screen to the left, snip my screen to the right, anyone. So basically, let's say you add an icon here, you can just drag the folder. Since it's on desktop, you can just drag it to VS Code and it will work. So basically, we're not going to be doing that in this video since I have no desktop icons. So yeah, we are inside our folder. It's currently empty. We can click on here to create a new file. You can click on here to create a new folder inside our HTML project folder. So I'm going to close this to show you guys the second method of opening or running VS Code on your system. Now we're going to go back to command prompt, still inside our folder, and we're going to type code and a full stop. Now code basically is the command for opening VS Code using command prompt, and then the full stop indicates that we are inside that particular folder. We are opening VS Code inside this particular folder or directory that we are navigated into in command prompt. So I'm going to click on enter and it should open up the folder for us. Okay guys, you can see that it opened it up for us immediately because that is the command that we're meant to type. Okay guys, so it has already opened up the folder for me using the command line I typed here. Using the command, the code here, this and then the full stop. So now let's get started writing some HTML code. So I'm going to come onto our file explorer here. This is our file explorer to explore all the files inside our HTML folder. So I'm going to click on it, and here you can see this little small icon here which says new file. This says new folder, so we are only concerned about these two. So now, since we're dealing with HTML, I'm going to type index.html. So now, why am I naming my file index.html? You've probably seen on every single web page, or if you've ever explored any single website file, you see that the main or root HTML file is usually named index.html. That's just the standard in HTML. And then you see that they end with a .html extension. That's to show and tell the browser or the computer system that this particular file is an HTML file and it should run on the browser. It should render every single content in it on the browser. So I'm going to click on enter, and here you can see that we're inside our HTML file. You can see that we're inside our HTML file, and this is our code environment. In a basic HTML file, there's a fundamental structure that needs to be imputed before you actually start writing any code, and this is called the boilerplate. What is the boilerplate? The boilerplate is basically a set of codes that makes your HTML code run and makes it standard. So now we're going to be writing our boilerplate code first, though there's a shortcut to generate this boilerplate code, but I want us to actually understand each and every single tags and elements of this boilerplate code. So now the first line of code in our boilerplate code is our doc type HTML. So basically what this line does, it tells the browser that this document type is HTML. That's what it does. So now the next one that we're going to be going to is HTML, and you see that it will autocomplete for me because I have something called Emmet. So you don't need to download Emmet, but if you want to download it, I will link a description below in this video to Emmet's website, so you can check out what Emmet really is. But essentially Emmet is like an extension that auto completes your HTML code for you, and it also brings some amazing features that speeds up development process for you, which we're going to look at in this video. So now I've created HTML, and this HTML simply is a container for all our HTML files: the body, the head, the h1, the h2, the image, the links, everything. So now inside the HTML we have two tags, and I'm going to be explaining what this two tag does. So we have the head tag and we have the body tag. They both have their own different functions. So the head tag is basically where all the information of our HTML file is kept, such as the title, the meta tags, which is basically explaining the data about data of our HTML file, the encoding the characters, the language that the website will be using. So that's what is inside this basic HTML tag, which is called the head tag. But in this video, and for the sake of this tutorial, we're only going to be looking at the title tag and the meta tags. So we're going to put the title tag. Let me spell that. Yeah, so now inside this title tag, you're going to give yourself any name that you want to give this title tag. So I'm going to name it HTML basics. That's a very simple name. I mean, this is HTML basics. So inside our body tag, this is where we have the h1 tag, the h2 tag, the h3 tag, and different other tags. But now I said we're going to understand what tags our elements are. So now inside here, I want to explain to you. Basically what I did here was I created a comment. Comments are lines of code or lines or statements that are not being executed. Basically they describe a particular line of code. They are used for description or explanation of a particular line of code for other developers or for your own use in the future. So to create a comment in HTML, we're going to type the angular bracket, your exclamation, and since I'm using Emmet, it's going to autocomplete for me, so I'm just going to type 2 dashes. Here we go. We already have our HTML comment. So you can put anything in between the dashes. So there's a shortcut to create a comment, which is control and /. So you see it's created it for me already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type this is a comment. and I'm going to create another comment which says difference between tags and elements. So basically, I said we're going to be explaining what the difference between tags and elements are. So what are tags? As I said, tags are the basic building blocks of an HTML element. So I'm going to create another comment that references tags and create another comment that references elements. So this is an example of a tag, h1, without this. And this is an example of an element. Why is this a tag and why is this an element? This is a tag because this is just a building block. It just signifies that yes, this is an HTML, this is an HTML tag. This is meant for headers. I mean, it does what the tag just does. It's just a building block. So the element is basically what is rendered on the browser. If I just put this and I run my HTML code, it won't display anything on the browser basically, but it will be showing in our code, like our code editor, in that space, that there's an h1 tag here that needs a content, there's an h1 tag here that is not complete, it actually needs a content. So basically, a tag is the building block, an element is a combination of the building block that is being rendered on the web page. So yeah, we can see in an element we have the h1 tag that we also have here in the tags, and we have this content, and then we have another h1 tag again. So what is the difference between this h1 tag and this other h1 tag? The difference is that one is a closing tag, the other one is an opening tag. So closing tags are tags that end an HTML element, and opening tags are tags that open up an HTML element. So without a closing tag, the HTML element is not complete. Without an opening tag, the HTML element cannot be created. So that's very simple. And under elements, we already know what tags and elements are and how tags and elements work. So now under elements, we have two types of elements. We have self-closing elements, or self-closing tags as you may call it. I'll put tags. And we have opening and closing tags. So what are self-closing tags? From the name self-closing, this simply means that they don't have a closing tag. They open up themselves and they close themselves. But note, most of these self-closing tags usually have attributes in them. What are attributes? Attributes are properties of an HTML element that defines what that particular HTML does. So an example of a self-closing tag with an attribute is the image tag. So every single image that you see on a website is being structured with this particular image tag. And inside this image tag, we have an attribute. We have two attributes actually, and we can have multiple attributes inside an image tag. But we're going to be looking at the first two most important attributes, which are the src. That's Emmet doing his job there for me. Which this src attribute, what it does is it links us to the particular image location so that we can render that image from where it is located on our browser. And then we have what we call alt. So the full meaning of this alt is basically alternative text. You've probably been or experienced a situation whereby you loaded a web page and then some images did not load, but you saw a text beside the the image icon that is showing an error, and you saw the description of that particular image. That's what this alt tag, or alt attribute rather, is doing. So another example of a self-closing tag is the BR tag. One more example is the HR tag. So what this BR tag does is a short form of line breaker. It's basically what spaces an element from another element. We'll be looking at that when we build our demo webpage. And what this HR tag does is it's basically an horizontal row. This particular tag just creates an horizontal row. Yeah. So now we're going to be looking at opening and closing tags. Yeah, an example of opening and closing tag is this very h1 tag here. But let's create more opening and closing tags, such as we have h2. This is an h2. Note, an opening and closing tag always has a content inside of them. That's why they are opening, content, then closing. So we can create more. We have paragraph. this is a paragraph. And what other ones we have? H3, this is an H3 tag or element. So now that we understand what self-closing tags are, opening and closing tags are, elements are, tags are, yeah, we can now dive into writing HTML, proper HTML code, and having it run on our browser. But before we run HTML code on our browser, we need what is called live server. What is live server? Live server is an extension that runs our code on a local server without us having to, reload every single time we run this particular code from our code editor. So to install live server is an extension. You can come over to here, extensions, click on it, and you need an internet connection to have this run. So basically I will type live server, and yeah, you're gonna wait for it now. Yeah, you can see we have lots and lots of extensions, but the one I want you to download, which is actually the most widely used live server extension, is this one by Ritwik Day. So I've installed it already. You can click, you see an install button here, just click on it. After it's uninstalled, we're gonna close this. After it has installed, you're going to see, after it has installed, you're going to see a little go live button here that shows that the live server, you can see click to run live server. That's a sign and proof that your extension has been installed. You don't need to install anything again. Once you just click on install on the extensions, it just installs for you. That's how fast and light VS Code is, and that's why I always recommend VS Code as the best code editor for you to get started. Whether you're coding Python, you're coding Java, just use VS Code. But though they have their own IDEs. Okay, let's continue with what we're doing here. So now to run our HTML code, I'm just gonna click on save. So now to run our HTML code, we're going to right click. Since we're using live server, we're going to right click, come here to live server, and you will see a little starting, you see a little starting button here to show that our server is about to start and run our HTML code. And note, the type of browser you use depends on you. I'm going to be using Google Chrome because Google Chrome is very fast. You can use Brave browser, you can use Internet Explorer, but Internet Explorer does not really support a lot of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript features, so I don't really recommend you use Internet Explorer. You can also use Mozilla Firefox. It's also a very good option. You can use Opera Mini, you can use Safari if you're an Apple user. So basically now we can see that our code has run on our browser using live server, and you can see if you come here to this search bar, you see our server. This is our server URL, this is the location, and this is the port. A port is basically the where that particular server is running, and then we can see our file index.html that we created in our Visual Studio Code here. So to make development very fast and easy, I'm going to snip my screen, putting my code editor at the right and my browser at the left. To do that, I'm using Windows 11, so I'm holding the start button down. That's why I showed this option. So I'm going to do this, and then you see this come here, click on this, and here we have our browser and our editor. So I'm going to click on here. So now we can see all the elements that we created on our web page. So now that we understand what tags, elements, closing tags, opening and closing tags are, let's now start to create a proper HTML file or a proper HTML web page. So I'm gonna comment all this. I'm not gonna comment it, I'm just gonna leave them here. I'm gonna put a description showing an H2 showing these are basic tags. You can see whatever we're creating is showing up, and elements. So before we move further, there are some rules of HTML. Like now, HTML follows a sequential order, which means a tag comes before another, and you cannot put a tag that is meant to come after the previous tag before it. Like now, this is bad practice here. I'm putting an H2 before an H1, but it's not meant to be like that. It's meant to be H1, H2, h3, h4, which simply means they cannot be an h2 tag if there's not an h1 tag. They cannot be an h3 tag or an h3 tag if there's no h2 tag. So yeah, we're gonna be changing that, putting this here, and this h1 tag you can see is not showing on our web page, so I'm gonna cancel it out. Okay, so now that we understand what HTML is doing and how the tags are following each other, let's build our basic web page. So now I'm going to come here, create a new file. I'm going to type basic web page.html, and in here, this is where I'm going to be showing you the shortcut to create your boilerplate without having to type all those doc type HTML, HTML body, head, without having to type them from scratch. The only reason I type them from scratch is so you can know what those tags are actually doing, because as a developer, if you don't know why you're writing your code and what your code is doing, then you might actually end up with a lot of bugs, and you might not understand how and why those bugs are happening or why those bugs are there. So to do this, to create the shortcut to get us started with HTML, I'm gonna click type exclamation, and here you can see in this emmet, you see emmet, this is emmet at work, emmet abbreviation. It brings out everything here that we need, and if you click on the second one, it's just doctype.html. So I'm going to click on that, then you can see all our HTML boilerplate being created. So I'm going to cancel this title. I'm going to name basic web page. Yeah, basic web page. So inside here we can see the meta. As I said, data about data, that's what the meta tag is for. So the meta tag is describing our character set. This is char set, which is UTF-8. You can search more on character set. This is the encoding, the character encoding that we're going to be using, which defines all the characters we're going to be, typing out in our HTML web page. And here we can see the meta tag explaining the language, basically explaining the HTTP equivalent, or just some data. Yeah, the HTTP equivalent. These meta tags are really not something you should bother about, but it's always good to have an idea of everything. So yeah, we can see our meta tag again, defining the viewport. Basically, a viewport is the the width and the height of our whole document, of our whole web page. So, and then we can see the document, the content here, this attribute, which is width equals to the device width, which is whatever device you're on. It's just describe it for you. And then we can see our initial scale of 1.0. So we're not going to bother ourselves too much. It's just for us to actually have a little bit idea of what all this is talking about. So if you want to understand more, you can just research on that, so you can know in depth on what all these tags are doing. So we're mostly concerned about building our web page here, since we already understand the basics we need to know about HTML. So yeah, so what are we going to be creating? We're going to be creating a simple HTML tag that contains a simple HTML web page that contains picture, links, buttons, H1s, H2, paragraphs, and that's all basically. But you can create any one you want to create. But for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to be creating a basic web page that consists of all the tags that we need to know to get started coding HTML. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a div tag. I'll explain what that means. So what is a div tag? Well, we have two types of containers in HTML. What are containers? Containers are, wrappers. Basically, they wrap up other HTML elements. They are like block level, elements. They wrap up other elements. And we have two types of containers. We have inline containers and we have block level containers. This div tag here, you've probably seen it on different websites before if you've inspected them. These div tags here are block level elements. What do they do? Block level elements are elements that take up the whole space of the browser. They take up the whole space. An example of a block level element is this H1 element here. Another example is this H2 element. But an example, the other type of container element is what we call inline element. And a popular example of that is the span. And if we read what VS Code is telling us, it says the div element has no special meaning at all. It represents its children, basically the elements that are wrapped inside it. And yet it can be used with a class, lang, and title attribute to mark up semantics common to a group of consecutive elements. Basically, what this is saying is that the div element can have some attributes such as class, lang, title attributes, and it can be used to wrap up other HTML elements. So it's just a way to organize your HTML files, your HTML tags rather. So okay, you've probably seen some example of this inline tag in Play. So I'm here on my browser to show us a visual example. I'm going to go to Wikipedia. Okay, yeah, you can see wikipedia.org. So it's going to open up Wikipedia for us, and I'm going to be showing you inline elements in Play and block level elements in Play. Okay, so we're just going to type HTML, and I'm going to click on search. Okay, now you can see Wikipedia has opened up, and an example of a block level element here is, if we inspect, well, I've not talked about inspecting, but I'm going to talk about insect. But if we check out this page now, in this particular place I'm highlighting here, this where my cursor is going around, this is a block level element because it's a paragraph, and inside this block level element, which is a paragraph, we have inline elements such as this. This might be an inline element, like an anchor tag, which is for links. This is also an inline element. This is also an inline element. This is also an inline element. So basically, these inline elements are elements that are inside block level elements. They can stand on their own, but it's best practice to put inline elements inside block level elements. So now I said I was going to talk about inspecting. I'm going to leave a link in the description below showing you some basic inspecting tools. But for the sake of this video, the only inspector we need is our Chrome developer tools. So to go to our inspector and to inspect our web page simply means to check out all the tags that we use in this web page, all the nitty-gritty details that we need to know about this particular web page. So now I right clicked on this web page, and I'm clicking on inspect, and yeah, you can see our inspector here. I docked it out. Basically, what docked out, I brought it out so I can put it on full screen here. Come here and just put it to the left so it will be easy for us. Yeah, so now you can see every single tag that we created in here is here, but we have some extra things like that I said, nitty-gritty details of our web page. So now, yeah, we want to know inline elements and block level elements, and to know that we can every single element we click on here shows up on our web page. Yeah, you can see this, you can see display block. We won't dive too much into this since this is not CSS. Display block, and we can see paragraph, block level, this block level, this block level as well. This is an inline. This is an inline because it doesn't have anything in it yet. This is block level. This is block level. Now another difference between block level and inline elements is that block level elements have margin and padding. Well, you might not know what margin and padding is, but margin and padding are properties of an element that are defined using CSS. Well, since we're not talking about what CSS is here, we're just going to focus strictly on HTML. Now I'm just going to create my inline element here. This is an inline element, and here create an H1 saying this is a block level element. Now you can see it's not showing it here because this is not the HTML file that we are typing in here. So to run, we already know how to run live server. So you right click, open live server, and you should see it open up. Yeah, so now to inspect, you right click and click on inspect. Yeah, that's what we just learned now. So I advise we keep practicing this every single time if you want to really know how to code in HTML. So yeah, we can see I'll just expand all this, leave the script tag because we're not dealing with JavaScript here. So this is the body tag which we have here, and yeah, this is our div. Yeah, you can see that it is a block level element. Why? It is taking up the whole space. Now I'm going to, in order for us not to just be alighting, I'm going to click here, because if I click there, you'll be able to alight from here and not having to come here to alight. So this is a block level element. This div tag, this div tag is a block level element, this particular div tag. And then inside this div tag, I have an h1, which is a block level inside another block level. So why is it called block level? It is taking up the whole space. We might not see it here because, you know, I snipped my screen, but if I put it on full screen here, if we inspect, you can see that it's taking up the whole space here, and it has this orange stuff. Basically what this orange stuff stands for is padding, margin rather, but we'll dive deep into that when we talk about CSS. So you can see it's taking up the whole space, this h1, and if we come to this particular one, you see that it is a span. And if we look at a span here in our code editor, we can see that we said it's an inline element because it is not taking up the whole space. It is just, you know, taking up that particular level. It is limited to where the text or content stops. So now that we understand what inline elements are and what block level elements are, we can start creating our web page properly now. So I'm just gonna, you know, snip my screen again. Yeah. So to start coding, I've created this div tag. We're going to put a comment to say our wrapper. This is what will contain all our HTML tags. And then this h1, we're going to cancel it and say description of me. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, but even as simple as it is, it's going to cover every single HTML tag you need to know about. So this is description h1, description of me, and then you can put an h2. As I said, you can't have an h2 before an h1. It has to be an h1 before an h2. So this is an h2. Yeah, just type h2 and you can see it's already recommending, Emmet abbreviation is already recommending some cool features for me. So I can just click enter and then create my h2 for me. So description of me, and then outside this web page tells you who I am. So basically you can see, I'm just gonna, you know, reduce this. You can see the block level elements being created here. You can see as we're typing is being created without us having to reload because of live server. So now everything is inside our wrapper, which is our div element. So let's create some inline elements. Okay, so first inline element we're going to create is a span, and inside this span I'm going to say I am Oluwagbemiga. So now to demonstrate inline elements inside block level elements, we're going to create a paragraph tag and put this span element inside the paragraph tag, and you see how it looks like. So to do that, I'm just going to, you know, create a paragraph. I am going to type I am a front-end web developer, comma, and I love writing HTML, full stop. So that's a very, very simple description of who I am and what I do. So I'm just going to copy this. Since this is a beginning text, I'm going to put it in front of here. Yeah. Let's cancel this inline tag. We don't need it again since we already understand what inline elements are. So now you can see this is a very simple web page explaining block elements, inline elements, and also explaining generic containers, which are div tags, and generic containers, which are div tags and span tags. Basically, generic containers are those containers that don't have any meaning, but they just contain elements, they just contain text, they just contain content. That's what generic means. So yeah, you can see we are covering the concept of h1 tags, h2 tags, paragraph tags, span, and the concept of block elements and inline elements. So now I said we're going to create images, we're going to create links, we're going to create buttons. That's what we have left to do in this tutorial. So now to do that, I'm going to be rendering our image to our browser in two ways. The first way is to render it from the particular website, and the second way is to download it and then render it. So to do this, I'm going to click on new tab and go to a website called Unsplash. Probably heard of it before. It's a very, very good website for getting free images, top quality images. So Yeah, I'm on Unsplash, and we're just going to search for a simple web page, a simple picture rather. And to make things fast, okay, cancel this. To make things fast, I'm gonna click on just search for a simple one. Dogs. No, dogs does not explain who I am. Okay, coding. Yeah, coding. Okay, yeah, you can see different images about coding. So now I don't want to download this picture, but I want to render it on my web page. How do I do that? Now to do that, what I have to do is right click on any image I want, and then you can see a list of options here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the image address, since we want to render the image on our browser. So after I've copied the image address, I come here and I said to render anything on your web page, you need either an HTML tag that is self-closing or an HTML tag that has an opening and closing tag. And since I already explained here that image tags are self-closing tags, I'm going to create an image tag here. They are self-closing tags, and you can also put this. It doesn't really matter since they are self-closing. This is an opening and closing tag, and it has this as the closing tag. But since this is a self-closing tag, you can just put this to indicate that it's actually a self-closing tag. Not really necessary, but for good practice. So inside an image tag, we have two attributes, two most common attributes that we need to consider. I'm going to come back to my web page here. Yeah, so it can show that we're actually displaying. Okay, sorry, this is it. So it can show that we're actually displaying whatever we're typing here. So inside here, I'm going to put src. And since this is, I said this attribute describes the location of where we're getting our image from. And here on Unsplash, we already copied our image address. So inside this src, this is where we're going to paste our image address. So Ctrl V, and then we have our image address. You can see immediately that our image loaded immediately from the website without downloading it. So the only disadvantage of not downloading an image and rendering it on your browser is if you don't have an internet connection, it won't actually render, since it's getting it directly from the website you're rendering it from using an internet connection. So I'm going to put a comment here that says rendering from the website, and rendering from the website is called absolute path. I'm going to come to that in a sec. Rendering from our local storage, that's the other way I'm going to explain. Storage, and that is known as relative path. What is an absolute path? An absolute path is the location, the exact location where that file is. A relative path is the location from where you are. Basically, the only way I can explain this, or the best way to explain this, is, for example, this is not where we are at. Where we are rendering this image from is not where we are at. We are inside our code editor, we are inside our local storage, but this image is on the website. But we are rendering the absolute part of this image on our browser. So now, for us to render the relative part of our image, what we have to do is download the image from the browser and put it in the place that we are, the exact place that we are. So that's just how relative path differs from absolute path, especially in the concepts of rendering images on the browser. So now, to demonstrate relative path, we're going to come back to our Unsplash. Let's download this one. We're going to download this photo. So I'm going to save it in the same folder that we are in our HTML file. So I'm going to come to desktop, since that's where we are. Come to new HTML folder. I'm going to change the name and type relative picture. Put a dash here. Click on it, and you have it download. It's downloaded already. So now we can go back to where we're rendering our browser and where we're rendering our web page. So for this not to disturb us, we're going to dock it out. I've removed it from the side. You can see that if I move it away, I can just minimize it since we're not using it now, so you can have the full display of our web page here. So Now we're going to create another image tag that will explain relative path, and here we're going to put the src. And now for us to know that this image has actually been downloaded into the folder as we just did now, we can come to Explorer, and then you can see the relative picture we downloaded here. If I click on it, it is showing here in VS Code. Yeah, you can see that the picture is the same as this very one that we downloaded. Yeah, we come back here now, we can cancel it since we want to render it on our web page and not in our VS Code. So to get to our relative path, not the website where you downloaded it from, but where we are, where we want to render our image from, is in the place that we are coding. So to do that, you put a full stop, and then you put a slash, and then you select your relative photo. It's as easy as that. Now some practices you can see some people doing, just putting slash without a full stop. The problem with this, it will render, because if you look at it here, you can see that it's running. These are other image. Put it on full screen, you can see the first image and the second image. This image is quite large, so I'm gonna snip my screen back. To how it was. Sorry, just gonna minimize this. Snip my screen. Now the problem with just putting slash and not full stop is that when you deploy, when you host your web page, your images won't load. Do you know why? Your images won't load because the full stop indicates there is a relative path. The full stop indicates that you are inside the particular folder. Let's say that we put our image inside another folder. I'm going to create a new folder and put images, and then I'm going to Ctrl C on this picture and then put it inside here. I just Ctrl V, pasted it inside this image folder. I can delete this from here. It's really not necessary to do that, but I just want to demonstrate why you need to put a full stop in front of the src of the image if you downloaded it. So now, if I do that, I'm gonna cancel this. Now I want to go to the image folder where my image is. If I do this, yes, you can see that it's showing everything. Relative picture, yes, fine. It will show here, but once you deploy it, once you host it, it won't show, because it does not know the path you are. The full stop is just indicating that this is where we are. Starting from where we are, the full stop, entering the image folder, and then locating the image. That's basically what this relative path is doing. So now that we understand block level elements, inline elements, tags, elements, self-closing tags, closing tags, and opening tags, absolute path with images, relative path with images, there's one more thing we need to know about images, and that is the alt text. Now, what I said about this alt text is that it explains what the image is doing, or what that particular image is when we've not created, or if it doesn't load on the browser rather. So now to demonstrate that, I'm just going to cancel out one little tiny thing from the URL. So I'm going to cancel this, and you see an error. Yes, you see no image there. Now this is bad experience for the user. Let's say that they want to know what that image was talking about. There's no alt text describing the image. Basically, there's no image there to the user's eye. But if you inspect, I'm gonna put my inspect here. If you inspect your web page, you see that there's an image, but it's not showing. This is the other image here. You see that there's an image, but it's not showing because there's no alt text to even describe or to even reference that particular image in case it did not load. So now to make sure and to avoid that, to make sure we avoid that problem, we're going to provide an alternative text for this image. So we're going to put unsplash image, and immediately you will see this here. This is our alt text. You've seen this a lot in websites in case maybe you have an internet connection error or the website is too slow loading. You will see this alt text describing that particular image pending the image does not load. So now that we understand what alt text are in images, src that specifies the location, relative and absolute path, let's now know how to resize our image. Now to resize our image is very, very easy. You can use CSS to do that, but you can also use HTML to do that. So I can just type with 30 But okay, I'm going to undo, since I want my unsplash image to load. Yeah, and I'm going to return this unsplash image back. Unsplash image. Yeah, so it's not going to show because this image is already loading. So it's only when we have an error in the link that this alt text will show, which is actually a great user experience. The users will know that there's an image there, it's just that it did not load. So now I want to add the remaining attributes that image tag can contain. We have the width to define the amount of width the image will have. You can have 30 pixels. You can see very small. You can put pixels. You can put percent, anyone you want. We'll dive into CSS units when we deal with CSS. So this is HTML, so let's focus on HTML for now. So now 30 pixels, the image is very small, so let's make it 100. You can see our image is 100 pixels wide. Now we can also, it's not only width we can define, we can also define height. So because where there's an height, there's a width basically. So here inside height, you can, type 100, and you can see it's longer and it's stretching our image, but they are proportional to each other. We have 100 by 100, but if we just create a width, it will be just 100, and the height will be the default. Like as it's expanding, the height will also be expanding. The height will just stay the way it is, but it's expanding with the width. But it's always good, put an height and width. But it's usually not advisable you define the size of your image using HTML. That's why we have what we call CSS, which defines your image, and even as it's stretching here, it makes it look very neat as it's stretching. So it won't stretch, the image won't stretch. So when we deal with CSS, we're going to look at that. So now we've already put the h1 tag, check, the h2 tag, the paragraph tag, the inline element, image tags, relative path, absolute path, attributes of an image, which are the properties that define this image and how it should behave. And now we're going to be looking at buttons and links, which is the last part of this video. So now a button is basically what you click on to perform a specific function. But in this tutorial, we're not going to be doing anything when we click our button. We're just going to create our button and explain how our button works. Basically, now to create a button, there's what we call a button element, a button tag basically, and a button element. And inside, if you check here, okay, let's resize this image first. Let's resize it. 200. So you can see our image, then our button. You see there's nothing inside our button, but that is actually a button. So I can just put click me. Yeah, this is our button, click me. So we're going to be understanding the difference between a button and an anchor tag. I said a button is what we click on to perform a specific function. An anchor tag is a link tag that we click on to take us to another page. That is the difference between an anchor tag and a button. So to create an anchor tag, you can just put this, which stands for anchor, and then this. Okay, I can just put a link basically, and then you can see a link. But yeah, this does not look like a link. Why? Number one, because it doesn't have any reference to any place we're going to, and number two, because it doesn't have any blue lines, because links are usually blue. And the reason why it is showing, it is taking up so much space, is because it's trying to match up with these images that are here, this image here, because they are all inside the div container if we inspect. So now, for us to make our anchor link or anchor tag complete, we need an attribute called href. So what href stands for is hyperlink reference. Basically, an hyperlink is a link that takes you to another location when it is clicked on. So here we're just going to put a simple hyperlink or a simple reference, https google.com. Basically, our link is going to go to google.com when you click on it. So when we click on it, you see now. Yeah, you can see it went to google.com. That's basically what a link does. So we're gonna go back to our HTML page, and we can see we've created an H1, we've created an H2, we can create an H3, but always remember, no matter the amount of headers, tags you put in your HTML code, make sure that H1 comes before H2, make sure that H2 comes before H3, because there can be no H2 if there's no H1, there can be no H3 if there's no H2, and it goes on and on till H6. So now that we've covered all the basic things we need to know about HTML to get started, we've already created our demo web page to understand what HTML is. I would like to leave a bonus section in the end because we're going to be deploying our web page. I didn't say this earlier at the beginning, but I want us to understand how we're going to deploy our web page. So now there's a website called GitHub. And there's also a website called Git. So I want us to come to GitHub. Open an account on GitHub. Now, what GitHub is a version control website that hosts your code. Basically, what this means is you can save all your code base on GitHub. Even if you lose your system and you've saved your code on GitHub, your code is safe. So you can always retrieve it back pending you already have an account with GitHub. So what is Git? Git is the version control system or version control software that handles our code and uploads them on Git. So on GitHub. So to use GitHub or to use GitHub, we need to understand what Git is. Because as a programmer, if you are just using GitHub without Git, then you won't actually have the necessary skills to compete out there in the world of programming. So now to install Git, you can just come here to downloads, click on it, and then you can install the one for your own system. I'm using a Windows and I already have Git installed. And when you install Git, when you click on it, you can, based on your system type, either 64-bit or 32-bit. I'll click on 64-bit. And you can also click here to download based on your system. So I'm not going to install it, but I've already installed it. But essentially, it's very easy to install. After installing it, there's going to be a package called git bash. So git bash is the terminal that is used to operate git commands for your code. So I'm going to open up git bash. Okay, so here is git bash. Yeah, you can't really see much difference, but for us, yeah, you can see it's quite different from our command prompt. If I come here and click on, this is our command prompt. I'll bring it out. You can see our command prompt does not have this color that git bash has, because git bash is for Git specifically, but you can use it to access your files as well. You can use it as you are using command prompt. You can use it like you are using command prompt. So I'm going to explain what this is doing. Basically, this is the path we are. This is the user. This is the name of my computer. This is an information of this particular terminal that we are in, and this is the branch we are on. So I'm just going to be deploying, but I'm going to be explaining basic Git commands that you need to understand, such as git commit, git push, git pull, git branch, git merge, and git add. So we're going to be navigating to where our project is. Minimize this, put this in the middle. So for us to do that, we're going to change directory into our desktop. And here you can see that just as our command prompt was doing for us, git bash is also doing for us. So in case you don't have git bash, you can also use your command prompt pending you've already downloaded Git. So I can show you. If I do git version, you see it's already showing the version, meaning I've installed Git. This is just to check that you've downloaded Git, then hyphen, then v. So I'm going to minimize this back and let's continue. So our project is new HTML folder. We're inside new HTML folder. So now we opened up GitHub. Before we continue, we should understand what we need to do to upload our code on GitHub. Now, if you did not upload your code first on GitHub, I'm going to come to my profile, and then I'm going to go to my repositories. Yeah, so basically, if you did not first upload your code on GitHub, then you have to create your repository on GitHub so that you can pull out the code on your local storage to GitHub. Basically, what I mean is that, let's say that you started your project by clicking new repository and typing the same name, new HTML folder, and then a description. This is an HTML folder for HTML basics, basically. Yeah, for HTML basics, I'm going to make it a public repository since I want everyone to see what I've done, and I'm going to add a README file because it is necessary you have a documentation and a description in detail of what your project is. So I'm going to create this repository. Basically what a repository is a repository is a folder for your project on GitHub. So yeah, we already have our new repository, and inside our repository we have just one file on GitHub, not on our storage. Remember that on our local storage we have our HTML file. Yeah, this is our local storage in our VS Code. We have these files. We have the image folder, we have basic HTML web page, and we have index.html. But this is not on GitHub. So now the question is, how do we put these very files on GitHub? That's what I'm saying. Let's say you start creating the web page on GitHub. What you need to do is very easy. But since we didn't create our web page from GitHub, or since we didn't create our files or folder from GitHub, we need to clone it from GitHub. We need to clone the same name as here. The same name as here. We need to clone it from GitHub, and then after cloning it, we then add the files on our local storage on the cloned repository from GitHub, and then we push our code to GitHub. So how do we clone a repository? From the name clone is just like getting a copy of the original version. So what we need to do, I'm going to put it on full screen so you can see the full GitHub website. So to clone, you click here, and then you will see some options such as HTTPS, SSH, and GitHub CLI. Well, out of everything here, the most secure is SSH, but there's a long process to deal with SSH, and to save time, we're going to be using HTTPS. I'm going to cover up in our next video how to set up an SSH key so you can use SSH for your GitHub project. So what I'm going to be doing is I'll click here, and you can see a long URL. So I'm going to copy this URL. You can see this copy here to show copied, and then I'm going to snip my screen back. Next time, please no. So I've just snipped my screen back, and here you can see that our VS Code is here. So we're going to go back to our git bash or our command prompt, and we're going to type git clone. So git clone, we're saying git clone this repository for us, and since we already copied the HTTPS, that's the URL of that particular project on GitHub, so that we can use it on our local storage, we'll just paste it here, and then you can see this git clone https github.com jailbreak, which is the name of my GitHub account, and then the new folder html folder.git. And in order for you to avoid errors, make sure that let's say you didn't start on GitHub, make sure that the name of your folder that you created on your local storage is the same name as the one you'll be creating on GitHub. Let's say that's if you did not start your project on GitHub. But let's say you start your project on GitHub, but then there's no need to create another folder on your HTML on your local storage. You just clone it and then you start using it. I'm going to demonstrate that after we do this. So I'm going to click on enter, and then you can see we're cloning into the directory that we are. So now for us to check, you can see that we have the cloned GitHub repo. Yeah, you can see inside here we have just one readme file. We have it here also. So now to make things very easy, very easy, I'm just going to copy all these files, cut it, come inside here, click here, paste it in. So here essentially we now have new folder, HTML folder, and inside new HTML folder we have new HTML folder, and then inside that new HTML folder we have our files and the image folder. So in order to avoid confusion, I'm going to delete the normal HTML folder we created. So to do that, we can go to File Manager. Okay, after opening up File Manager, we can go to our desktop, since that's where our project is, and then you can see new HTML folder, and then you can see this new HTML folder where we copied everything on. So I'm going to cut this, and then for it to actually show, this is an hidden folder. This is to show that this project was created using Git, and it was created on GitHub and then cloned using Git basically. So I'm going to cut this folder, and then I'm going to paste it here, still in our desktop here. Okay, there's quite an issue. We need to close our folder. Okay, just to avoid us closing this VS Code, let's just leave it in here for now. We're going to delete it later and demonstrate. Let's just stick with what we're doing with Git. Okay, so we are already inside. We can navigate into the new HTML folder. So in here now, in Git we have different commands. In Git we have the command to check the amount of files that we have inside our folder. We have the command to check the files we've added to Git. We have the command to check our branch, which is specific versions of our project. We have the command to add our files so that we can commit them and push them. So I'm going to be explaining each of these commands as we use them. So now we want to check the files we added. We want to check the status of our Git folder. What we need to do is we type git then status and then click on it. So now we can see some information, very interesting information that Git is giving us. We can see that Git is saying we are on branch main. The main branch is the master branch. Basically, the main branch is the branch that is being uploaded on GitHub. This is the branch where all our code base is going to be, where all the real changes are. We can create different branches for different features, but as we go on, we understand what that is. So now we can see your branch is up to date with the origin.main/main. This origin is this very one here on GitHub. This is our origin. This is our remote desktop. This is our remote folder on GitHub. This is our origin where we cloned the repository from. So now we can now see untracked files. Use git add then the file to include in what will be committed. So now we have three concepts to understand in this particular place, in this particular stage. What untracked files are, what tracked files are, what staged files are. So now what are untracked files? Untracked files are files that were added to your Git repository but have not yet been tracked by Git. Since Git is a version control system, it controls the amount of files that are being added to your folder and also tracks them for any change that was made in that particular file, so that you can push them, you can push the updated version to GitHub. So to further understand that, we can, since we've already checked for our tracked files here, none of our files are tracked by Git because we just added them. So to track our files, we need to add them, and to add them we simply type git add. And since we are not adding them one by one, we don't want to waste time, we want to add all our files, we just click on full stop. So now we may not see anything here, but to check that our files are tracked, which is the next concept we'll be explaining, you can type git status. So I recommend you use git status every time to check the status of your files in your particular folder. So I'm going to click on enter, and here you can see here the same information. Your branch is up to date with origins/main, and then we can see that the changes are now to be committed. What does a change to be committed means? Now to commit means to set that file or the set that file or the list of files to be for production. Now, what does changes to be committed means? Now, changes to be committed means the changes made on those particular files are ready to be pushed to GitHub. So now committing is just simply setting those files up ready to be pushed to GitHub with a message attached to them. So now we can see, now the only reason why it's saying changes to be committed is because these files are now being tracked by Git. They are being tracked by Git, and we can undo them from being tracked by typing this command. But since we don't want to do that, we're just going to commit our files and get them ready for pushing. So to do that, we're going to type git commit -m, which stands for message committed or commit files. Now, the reason why I didn't put committed files or created files is because it is best practice to put your commit messages like this, like it's in an action form: commit files, create files, add styles, add logic, create JavaScript file. Instead of created JavaScript file, it's not a past tense, it's something that is happening, it's something that you did. So you commit files. So I click on enter, and then you can see it's showing us an interesting information that 3 files have been changed because they've been tracked and they've been committed. And then inside each of these files together, we made 60 insertions. This is Git tracking your files for you. So it will track the amount of deletions you make, the amount of insertions you make, the amount of files you deleted, the amount of files you modified, and the amount of files you created. So that is Git for you. So now the next step for us to actually see the command to actually put our HTML folder onto GitHub. Since we didn't start with GitHub, we can type git push. And as we've typed git push, and what git push did was it pushed our code to GitHub. Made a mistake there by saying set upstream. The reason why git push worked is because, if you recall, in our file manager we copied all our files to be inside the Git folder. So any file that is not inside Git folder, you have to set the origin of that particular file to be equal to that on GitHub. So that's not all. If we refresh, we'll see all our HTML file uploaded here. Yeah, you can see initial commit made 15 minutes ago, made our commit 15 minutes ago. Yeah, if we come back up here, you can see the commits, made it 15 minutes ago. So Git will track all the files and track the time it was made and track the amount of commits you made, and then track the commit message as well alongside with the files. So yeah, if we check our index.html just to confirm that yes, it's actually correct, if we compare, I'm not going to snip my screen, I'm just going to go to my code editor, and if we come here, you can see that it's the same thing. We've uploaded our files on GitHub by using the basic git commands: git push, git commit, git status, git add. I said I was going to talk about one more, that's git branch. So now git branch, basically a branch is a snapshot of your original project. So let's say that you are working on a team of developers and you guys are working on a project, and you want to make your changes to that project, but you necessarily don't want to do it on the main branch. So in case you have any errors, it won't affect the normal project, you can create a branch. And to create a branch, you can just type git branch, new branch. You might not see it created, but if you type git branch, you can see the list of branches you have. You have the main branch and the new branch you just created. So now for us to actually go into our branch, we can type git checkout new branch, or git switch new branch. Okay, so guys, we just switched to our new branch here. So if you check here, every file that we made in here, every change that we make in here won't show on our main branch unless we deploy and merge. So we're not going to be going too deep into Git here. We just wanted to deploy our web page. So now for us to deploy our web page, we don't need to use hosting platforms such as Netlify, such as Vessel, but you can use them. They are very easy to use. We're going to be using GitHub Pages. So for us to do that, we're going to come to our code, yeah, and then we're going to go to settings, pages, and then once page is done, you can see it's saying deploy from branch. Yes, we want to deploy from our branch, which is our main branch. And yeah, we can select the branch. Since we've not yet pushed the new branch, it won't show here on GitHub. So every pushed code from Git shows on GitHub. That's what push is used for. So yeah, we're going to deploy from our root. Yeah, it has two options. The docs simply means you are deploying from another particular folder, but since we didn't create any other folder, it's just our index.html, which is our root file, as I said earlier. So I'll just click yes, and then I'll save. So yeah, you can see it says GitHub pages source saved. If I reload this and I go back to code, okay, we're supposed to see a GitHub pages link around this corner, but let's just go back to settings and click on pages. Okay, yeah, you can see the GitHub pages already, but it's saying here that it's queued. If you click on it, yeah, it's loading, it's in progress. Our page will soon be deployed. You can keep reloading to check. Now you can see that it has been deployed. So now when I click on view deployment, we're going to go to our Git. Yeah, you can see our HTML file. Now do you know we have two HTML files? And yeah, if you check, it's deployed on where? Jailbreak, which is the name of my GitHub account, then GitHub.io, which is the GitHub domain, and then the new folder, which is our GitHub repository, and then the root folder and the root file. It will show because it's already displaying it here. So now the main reason why you're only seeing one out of our files deployed is that if you have an index.html file and you deploy on GitHub pages or any hosting platform, that index.html file is going to be the first to be deployed. So if you have links that go to other files, then you can you can just add links to go to those other files. So yeah, we talked about anchor links, but we didn't go into detail too much about anchor links. So now I want to let my two pages, that's my two HTML pages, to be visible. I want one to link to the other and deploy it on GitHub so that I won't have to just start to navigate and do things manually. I'll just want to click on the link and it takes me to my other page, and click on the link and it takes me back to the page I was on. So to do that, we already have an anchor tag here. We're going to cancel it. Okay, we're not going to cancel it, we'll just create another one. And then to create an anchor tag, remember, do this. No. Okay, to create an anchor tag, remember, I just type this, and then you put your href, which stands for your hyperlink reference. And then since I want to link to my index.html, what am I going to do? I'm going to remember relative path. We're inside the same folder, so we'll just click here and then index, go back to index.html. So I'm going to come to index.html and I'm going to create the anchor tag. I'll just put a to create everything for me, and then click on this since it's relative. And then since we're going to the other page, you can say go to the other page. Go to the other page. Save this, and since we still have it running on live server, we'll go to our Chrome browser. This is the one we're actually running. Okay, you can see error here. Let's reload. Okay, there's an error, so let's just dispose it and rerun it. Okay, yeah, you can see the link we just created. We don't want to be running it locally. We want to deploy it so that people can actually link to our other page. So to do this, we can click go to other page, and it takes us to this other page, and we can see all the tags and elements we created on this page. And if we click not this one but this one, to take us back to our index. Good, all well and good. That is anchor. What anchor tags are meant for. They are link tags that link to other locations or other web pages. So now we can have our two web pages that we created available on GitHub. So now we want to track those files on Git again. We're going to come to our terminal, and here we can see we have a lot of things here, but since we're inside here, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the status of my folder. So to do that, I'm going to type git status. You can see that we modified our basic web page by adding the link tag, and we modified our index.html by adding the link tag. So we want to add the two of them without adding them one by one. So we can do git add, and then if we check the status again, we can see changes to be committed as we saw before. We don't want to restore them, we don't want to untrack them, we don't want to unstage them. To stage a file means to add the file to be ready for commit, and to commit a file means to get the file ready for pushing. That's the difference between a staged file and a committed file. Now to track a file means to add the file to Git as well, so that Git can track for any changes made to the file. So that we've added these two files, so they've been modified. Let's say that we didn't add them before, it will put created because they were just added to GitHub. But since we've added them before and we made changes to them, they've been modified. So now we want to commit these files so that we can push them to GitHub. So to do that, we type git commit new, okay, not new, commit HTML files, or add anchor links. No, add, yeah, anchor links. That's our commit message. Pretty simple, because that was what we did. Your commit message should always contain what exactly you did that you are making that change, what you did while you're making that change. So commit, you can see 2 files committed, 5 insertions, 1 deletion. That's what we did. It tracked everything we did while we were making our change in here. So now we're going to minimize this and go back to this, and then we can check the status again just to check. You can see on branch main, your branch is ahead of this by 1 commit, and you can use git push to publish your local commit. Now if we type git push, that's we're pushing our code. We've already committed our code, we're pushing it to GitHub. Yes, you can see everything is being pushed already, and then you can see all the details. And then from our main branch, this means from our main branch here to the main branch on GitHub, which is our origin. We've already set up how everything is going to be. So now we can go to our Chrome, and then we can reload the, if you go to GitHub, let's check the changes made on GitHub. If you go to GitHub, okay, if you go to GitHub here, we can see if we reload, it's always good to reload so you can see the necessary changes. You can see the basic HTML web page 1 minute ago, and then if we come down here to check our changes, we can see the link we added. Go back to index.html, and if we go back and check index.html, which was also committed just 1 minute ago, and click on it, we'll also see the link that links to the other page. So now we said we want to see our links, we want to be able to see our 2 web pages on our domain that we hosted on GitHub. So to do that, we're going to come to the link here, and I'm going to click on view deployment. And yeah, okay, yeah, you can see it's always good you reload because it takes time. So just reload to see the latest update. So now you can see if you click on go to the other page, it goes to my other page perfectly well and good. So we've already covered everything you need to know to get started coding HTML, and we covered anchor tags, we covered block level elements, inline elements, HTML tags, HTML elements, closing tags, self-loading tags. We covered a lot of things in this video, including a bonus section that covers all you need to know to get started with Git and GitHub. So guys, I've come to the end of this video, but I would like to have you guys subscribe to my channel, like my channel, like the videos, and leave a comment. Refer it to your friends, since this is my first YouTube video, and I plan on making greater videos for you guys in future. So I would like to let you guys know that the next video will be covering semantic HTML, which is going to be us diving deep into HTML and how HTML can improve accessibility for visually impaired users or people with disabilities. So thank you guys for staying up and staying tuned to the end of this video. God bless you and have a good day.